This is Elizabeth Gilbert, pastor of Union Chapel, Indy, and this is our sermon podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you find this time meaningful and that you are encouraged as we are together. Enjoy the message. What is the scariest thing you have ever done? Jump out of an airplane? Go bungee jumping? Is that still a thing? Do people still bungee jump? No, I don't know. Maybe zip lining was your thing. Starting a new job, maybe that's the scariest thing you ever did. Or you moved to a new city. Maybe having kids was the scariest thing you did. Or volunteering at your kid's school. That's a scary thing, right? Maybe the scariest thing you ever did was kill a spider that was in your bedroom when you were there alone. Okay? If you've ever had to do that, you know what I'm talking about, right? You can't leave it go. You got to kill it, right? Because you're there alone. Well, I don't know what it was for you, but here are a few scary things that kids have identified in their lives.
I'm afraid of heights. A breaking sign?
Why does he scare you?
Because he's a zombie and he nibbles brains. Nightmares. Bad dreams. Bad dreams?
Rats. One time, we were walking to the car, and there was a dead rat on the side of the concrete. Well, almost dead, and he was just staring at us.
When my mommy and daddy do a scary face. When I get in trouble sometimes. A ghost. A ghost? Like a ghost or something. They do this. Boo! Ooh. The tiger. They're super fast and it's impossible to get away from one. A weird guy. I'm scared of all bugs. Monkeys, because they're mean and sometimes they steal your car keys. My computer, when I try to log in, it says, something went wrong, please try again later. And it's so creepy. Scary movies, skeletons. Skeletons do this sound. It sounds like nibbling brains. When I hear the smoke alarm, I'm like, evacuate everyone, evacuate! And then robots do this. They do scary things like this. I am a scary robot.
Well, whether we will admit it or not, we all, at every age, experience some level of fear from time to time. Author Annie Downs opens a recent book with this confession. She says, I'm not brave. I lack courage. I'm 33 years old and I sometimes cry when I leave my parents' home in Georgia to drive back to my little brick house in Nashville. I've never jumped out of a plane, and I only ride roller coasters when I'm trying to impress a boy. Some people live for an adrenaline rush. I live for a sugar rush. I don't think it's fun to risk, to gamble, to possibly lose. I like safety, smart choices, and learning the easy way. Tell me it's a bad idea, and I'm going to believe you. I don't know about you, I could have written some of those words myself. I'm not a risk taker by nature. I do prefer to learn things the easy way. I am delighted to hear your story of what went wrong, make note, and not do that myself. That seems like the better way to go. I have to wonder about Deborah that we read about just a few minutes ago. Was she brave by nature? Was she a born risk taker? Did she receive a little more courage at birth than the rest of us? Or did she have just as many fears as we do? Would she have always longed to live that exciting, risk-taking life? Or was she surprised to find herself in such a position? Was she at all reluctant to do the brave things she did? The entirety of Deborah's story, as we know it, is contained in the 4th and 5th chapters of the book of Judges. From that story, we learn that Deborah is a prophetess, a religious leader. She's a wife, and she's a judge over all of Israel. Judges in that period were what we might call tribal leaders of the Israelites. Scripture records 12 such judges, And judges, in this case, were not like we think of judges, that their job is in the legal system, but rather the judges in this context were people that ruled over a group and commanded the business and the life of that group, and also was their military leader. Really, they were more like the kings that were to come next in Israel's story. Whether Deborah was brave by nature or somehow had to dredge up the courage to be the person she was and do the things she did, we can't know. But I think it's safe to say she did some really brave things. The first brave thing that Deborah did was take on a leadership role during a time when the Israelites were being threatened and oppressed by the resident Canaanites. It's hard enough to step into a new role and step into leadership when things are going well. It's very scary and very difficult to do it when things are going poorly. The Canaanites we read about were the local, heavily armed, militarily advanced enemy of the Israelites. And they had already been terrorizing the Israelites for 20 years when Deborah was called into leadership. How scary do you think it was for Deborah to say, yeah, sure, God, I'll do that? I think that's the first brave thing she did, was say yes when God said, Deborah, it's you that's going to lead next. And more than just say yes to leadership, Deborah said yes to a leadership role that had been previously only filled by men. In fact, her society was already established, or at least recorded as, a highly patriarchal society. It would have been nearly impossible for Deborah to imagine a woman being in that role and being successful in that role, in that setting. Can you imagine the opposition she just faced within her community? I think she had to be brave to just show up every day and take the seat and make the decision and say the things and lead the people. But each day that she did show up, did do all those things, surely her trust in the God who called her to the task grew. It's like what they say about practice. The traditional saying that piano teachers and basketball coaches have spouted for years is practice makes perfect. Now, one of our sons had a soccer coach that said that wasn't true. He said practice makes permanent. Another way to look at it, whichever is true, and I imagine it's a little of both. Practice does give us confidence. That piano student that practiced their recital piece 100 times before the recital is going to take the platform with a lot more confidence than the student who didn't do that. The U.S. Women's Olympic gymnastic team has talked about this very thing this week. They all say they are confident as they approach the biggest stage, the biggest competition of their careers. And they say it's because they have completed so many repetitions of the skills and the programs they will do. They are well practiced and they are confident as they prepare to take the stage. And that's how that works. As we do hard things, as we do anything over and over, as we practice being brave in those little things that come to us day to day, we are more confident when the bigger things of life and faith ask us to have even more courage. As larger challenges came to Deborah, she had the confidence to tackle those situations because of the smaller practice bravery moments she'd been having. As bigger things were required of her, she was ready, prepared, practiced to arbitrate the legal matters. That was a part of her job. Judge the parties in that conflict. Develop a capable military. Inspire the people to stand up for themselves and defend themselves against the greatest, strongest enemy of the day. What is your experience with being brave? With facing those things that scare you, that overwhelm you, that seem impossible as they're coming at you from across the horizon? It's in these moments, isn't it, that we wish we had the courage of the superheroes that we see in the movies, right? Even when they are outsized, outnumbered, outpowered, they go in with guns blazing, flashing all of their superhero gadgets and powers, and they take that enemy down. But I don't know. I don't think this is how courage and bravery works in the everyday real world. At least that's not my experience. And I don't see it happening for superheroes of the faith very often. I don't think for Deborah or for us, bravery is very often about that one big moment. I think it's much more about the little moments when we show up, simply do that job or that task in front of us and step on to the next challenge. I think it's more often about setting aside our desires for comfort, safety, and security, and in their place, putting trust and obedience. Saying to God, each time that God presents that next thing, okay, God, I'll do this next thing. And before we know it, we've done the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and our courage muscle is a little stronger, and we're ready to take on that bigger thing for God. Jenny Allen knows this experience. She played it safe for a long time, holding on to safety, security, and she confesses her fear before stepping out with God to vision and found the IF Gathering, a women's conference and leadership movement. She has also, at this point, authored a number of books, written Bible studies, and published many things. But she didn't do that all in one fell swoop. One step at a time, she found the courage to get off the back row, as she says it, and step by step, follow God and do the brave things. I'm going to invite you to hear her story, but please understand that Jenny speaks as a woman to women. She's a leader in women's ministry, but her message today is for all of us. Let's take a look.
For me, there was a lot of fear associated with using my gifts and with calling. And I think down deep for a long time, I kind of knew what I was supposed to be doing, and yet I chose the back row because I think I justified it by believing that I was being humble and allowing other people to use their gifts. And so I sat on the back row and I felt justified in that. And then I come across the blog of a girl named Katie Davis, and she's living in Uganda, and she's adopted girls, a lot of them off the street, and she's only 23 at the time, and she's starting these ministries, and it really put me on the floor because I realized that a lot of my life I had been building with the values of safety and comfort and protection and honestly being liked. Like, I was on the back row not out of humility, I was on the back row out of pride. I was on the back row because I was afraid of looking arrogant. I was afraid of using my gifts and people judging me. And I think that a lot of us as women are holding the very things that God gave us to make Him known on this earth inside of us. And we're terrified that if we get brave and step out, that we're gonna lose control and that we're gonna lose safety and comfort and people and things that we've actually built our entire lives upon. And so something about dying to it all, something about looking at Katie in Uganda and her life that just somewhat was obliterated here. And then she was just living recklessly out of her callings, out of obedience, out of the voice of God, out of the scriptures. She was just purely about the name of Christ. And in my home, with my 4 kids, with my crazy life, I wanted to be about the same things. I didn't know if it would take going to Africa and leaving everything. I didn't know if that was possible, and honestly for me, that's not my calling. I wanted to figure out how to do that here, how to live the life that God has built for me, the good works that He prepared in advance for me to do. I wanted to figure out how to do those with reckless abandonment here and now and not be so afraid. And I think that a lot of other women are in the same boat. I think a lot of us are holding in us so many things that could glorify God, but we're so terrified of using them. And I just think that we could make each other braver. I think that if we could come together and encourage each other and help each other dream and help each other realize that there is no one way to follow God, that every one of us has unique works in our place and in our time to live out. And so my prayer is that IF Gathering would be this beautiful assembly of women from every different type of walk, from every different denomination, from every different spot on earth potentially, that we would come together and we would dream about what it would look like to glorify God really beautifully and well and passionately and authentically in our generation.
I love her message and her passion for God and what God has called her to do. I love what she says about this idea of fear holding us back from doing what it is God has called us to do and holding us back from who God has called us to be. Every time God says to you, I have something for you to do. Go here, do this, start that, be this person over here. And every time God does that and we hold back, at least a part of that holding back is fear. It's being fearful to look silly, to risk. It's not being brave enough to invest the resources that God calls us to invest, to give up whatever it is we might have to give up here to do this over here. For Jenny, it sounds like connecting with others who were being brave was a big part of growing her confidence, as was doing smaller brave things to get better at it. Things like leading in her home and her family, testing the water in smaller venues, and eventually stepping up to that big scary thing that was in front of her of launching a conference and a women's leadership movement. But by that time, she was ready, made ready by lots of little brave moments that strengthened her courage muscle. Annie Downs, the author we heard from at the top of this message, writes about this very thing in her book, Let's All Be Brave. She writes that she doesn't think bravery comes on in a flash like we see in superhero movies and comics. Annie suggests that bravery and courage is what happens when we are faithful to God's call, one step at a time. We certainly hear this in Jenny Allen's story as she found the courage to follow God step by step into women's ministry leadership. I think we see it in Deborah's story that we read part of today. As she is faithful in each little thing that God called her to, she grew in trust of God and confidence in her own abilities. And you would hear this same story, this same theme clearly in Annie Downs' Fuller story if you picked up her book. See, Deborah's first act as a leader was not to lead the military up against the strongest, most advanced army in the region, which she eventually did. Her first act was to say yes when God said, I've got a job for you. Will you show up there tomorrow? And then she just took each next step, did the next thing, as God eventually led her through to a victory that rescued her people and launched them into the longest period of peace experienced during the era of the Israelite judges. And did I mention she was the only female judge that led her people into the longest period of peace during the judges? That she was a female judge, the only female judge that did there. Nobody finds that. Interesting. Okay. Spoke to me. Caitlin Bouchelon puts it this way, more and more. I'm convinced that bravery looks like 1 million small moments of simply showing up. Another author puts it this way, brave and faith go hand in hand. In order to trust and have faith, we need to be brave. And in order to be brave, we need to trust God and have faith in God in God's presence and faith in God's power. Really, being brave looks like being faithful. And often being faithful means simply showing up. What scary thing is God calling you to show up to? And to just take that first step into. It could be anything. We all have unique lives, unique calls, unique superpowers. So our calls are going to be unique as well. Is God calling you to maybe be more involved with the lives of your neighbors, the people that live right around you? Get to know them more, serve them more, love them more. Is God calling you into leadership here at Union Chapel, Indy, or in some other Christian mission? Has God given you a heart for a particular group of people or an area of ministry, but you haven't taken that first scary step to say, okay, God, I'll show up and give that a try. Maybe God is calling you to be brave enough to forgive that person that has hurt you. Love that person that no one likes. Show compassion to that person that is just so bristly and difficult. Letting your guard down and being vulnerable, that can take real bravery. Whatever it is that God is calling you to, be encouraged. You don't have to save the world on your first step in God's direction. Just keep your eyes on Jesus. Take that first brave step, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. And before you know it, you and God you'll be leaping tall buildings in a single bound. You'll be tackling all sorts of villains and monsters together. At the end of the day, that's what being a superhero of the faith is really all about. Walking with God, being faithful to the task at hand, taking that next brave step, and letting God do some amazing things in and through you, especially as you trust God more and more each step of the way. In a few moments, we're going to experience the song Oceans, alternately titled Where Feet May Fail. I invite you to sing along or just listen or meditate on the words, that there are amazing words and message in this song. Experience this music in whatever way opens you to the movement of the Spirit in the music. The song is based on the story of Matthew when the disciples were out in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. It's the middle of the night, it's dark, the waves are battering the boat, the disciples are scared, and then they see someone walking on the water toward them, and that really freaks them out, and they say it's a ghost, and they cry out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it's okay. Do not be afraid. It's me." And then Jesus does that thing in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm, walking on the water. He says, "Peter, come out here with me. Peter, come walk on the water with me." The lyrics of this song start out, "You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown, where my feet may fail." See, it's in the scary places, in the moments when we are afraid, where Jesus says to us, "Join me here. Come on, take that first step with me. It's going to be okay. I'm with you. Yeah, you don't think your feet are going to do it, but trust me, they will." And as we take those first brave steps, just one at a time is all Jesus asks, we'll discover that we are actually right there with Christ, and God is at work in that moment. You know, maybe that was Deborah's superpower, not so much courage and bravery, but being faithful and trusting that each step would take her closer to Jesus and to experiencing God's power in her circumstances. As we go to God in prayer, I invite you to identify that scary thing in your life right now. What is it that God has in front of you that's making you a little afraid? Can you name it? Maybe see it in your mind's eye. Close your eyes if it's helpful to place yourself in that situation. As you do that, maybe even let that fear well up in you a little bit. This is a safe place. You can feel the fear and know that you'll be okay. As you are imagining that situation, that fear, imagine Jesus walking into the middle of it. He's there with you in that scary place. Tell Jesus about your fear. Cry out to him like the disciples in the boat. Let him hear your concern, your worry, your terror even. And now hear Jesus call you to take that first step toward him. Jesus is calling you to take that next brave step. He's saying you can face tomorrow without a job. Just take that step toward me. You can admit that relationship is over. I've got your hand in this. He's saying, go for it. Start that new idea, that new ministry, that nonprofit. Make the phone call, do the research, whatever it is. I'm with you. Take that first step. He might be saying, it's okay to let go of that anger. Yeah, it's been your companion for a long, long time, but let it go. I'll step into that void in your spirit. Maybe all he's asking you to do is schedule a conversation for next week, that one you've been putting off for weeks or months. He promises to sit right there with you. Whatever that scary thing is for you, hear Jesus calling to you to take that step towards Jesus. Hold out your hand and let Jesus take it.